Despia now finally supports smart widgets, and this has been our #1 request from our users, getting smart widgets and widget kits set up inside of Despia. And today I'm super thrilled to show you how to set it up and how simple it is to get started with smart widgets. Now, if you have never used smart widgets in your life, I want to show you here on my screen how they work. So smart widgets essentially are widgets that you can turn your app into. So I can click on my app icon here, and I can click on a widget, and then I can turn my app icon into a widget that can show a chart, some text, some data, some preview coming from our backend. Now, Despia actually lets you build those widgets on your own server, and you can deploy them on your backend using code or no code. We do have no code options available, and you can connect this with your user data. Now, the way it works is right now we're looking at a fallback widget. Now, the fallback widget is to make sure that they don't have an empty widget, right? There needs to be something like click into the app to configure your widget, something like this. This here is our fallback widget. Now, once you click into the app and open the application, once you click on the widget, will open the application, right? And inside of here, we can run code to update the widget source. So we can now set it to go to a widget that has our user attached to it, and then it will refresh it every minute or so to show the latest user information coming from our backend. So they work fully remotely, and it's a pretty cool thing to do, especially if you work with charts and data in your application and you want your users to have everything live and have like a little overview. So let's take a look at how we can set this up, because it is pretty simple. So inside of the Despia editor, we need to go on targets. Now, targets are conditional SDKs. Now, with the widget, it's a little bit different, like with our add-ons, for example, right? The widgets need to be set up, and you need to have widgets if you want to use widgets, but you can't have widgets inside of your application if you don't want to have widgets. So because the SDK is conditional and we only need to import the modules if you want to have widgets, you need to click on here and enable it. Now, if you enable it, you will see that there is some configuration that's outstanding. So you need to complete with the process. You need to complete the process of setting up your widgets. So you want to click on Open Smart Widget Editor here, and now you can configure your widget. Now, the widget name, you can do my widget. If it's your email widget, I would call this email preview. Or if it's a stock widget, you can do my portfolio, something like this. Now I'm just going to call it my widget, and then widget description, I'm just going to do made in Despia. And that's just, again, an example here, so you can take a look at this. Now it asks us for an SVG server. Now we need to host a fallback. This is the fallback URL. So we need to host a fallback widget on our server. Now, if you want a free option, you can use GitHub and then use JS deliver to serve that SVG file. But today I want to show you how you can do a hosted option if you want full control to that in case the URL changes and all that kind of stuff. So in here, I have a widget set up in Xano. Now, the way I did that is I just created a GET API request on my Xano account. We're now creating a variable, and that variable will contain an SVG widget. Now, you can go on a cool tool called svgviewer.dev, which lets you preview SVG code. And the way the widgets work in Despia is their SVGs are being programmatically loaded into the widget. So the cool thing is your backend can build this SVG file with static or dynamic content, and then every time you load it, it just gets the latest user information. So now I just have this. I had it made by Claude. Claude is pretty good at doing those widgets. We'll link in our documentation the prompt that we have used to build such a beautiful widget here, and then you can use that to build your own and just use like template text or mustache.js to kind of like, replace some of those values and make them dynamic coming from your backend. But we want to copy this, we want to go into our backend, and essentially what our backend will be doing is we will have this SVG file, we will have our backend return the SVG file, and we're setting a content header of image SVG plus XML. Now you can do this in Supabase, you can do this in a Cloudflare worker. I'm just showing it in Xano here because it is simpler to understand if you just look at the blocks from a, from a principle, how to set that up, and then you can translate to whatever tool you're using. So you're not bound to using Xano for that, even though if you want, you can, right? So now we have this SVG. I'm just copying the URL here. And as you take a look here, if I just open this API, I will get my widgets served from Xano directly where I can host them, or from any backend provider that you want to work with. Now I'll just put that inside of here. And then the refresh rate, that's the rate that this widget will update. I would just do 5 minutes if you really want to have a quick update. If you have some time, if you don't necessarily need real-time data, you can do 15. And if you like to save backend costs, you can do 30 or 60. Now I'll just do 1 for the sake of the video because we don't want to make a 61-minute video just to show you the widget refresh, but you can certainly do that as well. So now that we have everything set up, we want to save the changes, and now you see we have it all nicely configured. So now, because this is a change on the target, you want to go and publish your Despia application again and rebuild everything. Now it's going to set this up. Now I can skip the line because I already have something prepared here. As you can see from the intro of the video, we already have that widget set up. So we just now continue with that. So now I have the widget. How do I change the widget? How, once I log into the application, how do I link a widget that is linked with the user information? That's a great question. Because we can't just have the fallback for everybody. We want to show custom data for the specific user. And I want to show you how we can do this. Now, we have some documentation that I'm working on, and part of that documentation will be this video here. But as you can see, we can use Despia's deep linking schemes to kind of like set a new widget source and a new refresh time for that source programmatically using a little bit of code. And here's where the magic comes in. I can now go inside of my web application and run this code, for example, on load or on button click. Or you could do this after the user logs in and authenticates. You can do this really at your convenience, whatever works with your application. But before we do this, I want to show you how you can build a dynamic widget. So for this, I do have a database here of some sample data. And again, you can use any backend tool, but I do have username and I have a score. And let's say we want a widget that will show the score. Let's copy this ID here, right? And let's go to our APIs and let's create a new API endpoint. There will be a custom endpoint. It will be a GET request. And we will call this custom. This will be our custom widget, right? And then we'll do custom. And we're going to make a URL parameter dynamically in the URL by putting it in an object. And we will do user, or we'll just call this ID, right? And we'll save this. This conflicts with another API, so let's just call this custom here, and then we'll edit the name later. So let's do custom, and then I'm going to do, let's get that in here, custom ID. Let's see if that works. No, name verb is currently being used by another query. I need to do a slash. Okay, there you go. I forgot the slash. We need to do custom / ID. There you go. So now it's part of the URL. And what I can do is I can add an input here that is a text called ID, right? So we are getting this from a path of the API. And now inside of here, I can add a function and I can do a get record. I'm querying my database. I'm getting a record from my database, from my sample database, and I'm getting it based on the ID, and there you go, I have this API input. So if I publish my API now, and I am copying the URL, and if I were to open this here in my browser, you will see that I'm getting nothing. But if I go back to my database and copy the appropriate user ID that we would get from the auth.me information when the user is logged in, right? We would paste this in here and run this, and you will see that we're getting the data coming back from the user. Now, we just need to adjust the content type and serve an SVG and we're good to go. So let me show you how you do that. Let's say we want this SVG, we want to rebuild this SVG a little bit so that this can, you know, be our score. So inside of here, we can call this hey, and then I'm going to do name, right? Hey, name. And I'm just going to remove, I think this is the icon here, right? So I'm just going to remove this here. Oh, I did remove a little bit too much. There you go. There you go. And then I would need to adjust it a little bit. So let's see, we have this, let's make this 20, 30, 28. With SVGs, you always got a little bit, gotta always play a little bit with the pixels, but that looks great to me. So we have hey, name, and then we will do in here, current score, and then I'm going to do score, right? And you can use mustache.js or whatever you want to do, right? But we're just building a widget here. And then I'll keep that description as a little advertisement. And we just copy this, right? And now we're going into this endpoint that we're building here. And we are now adding a function of creating a variable. And we're calling this variable SVG. We're just putting this inside of here. And now we're just doing text replacements for name. So I'm going into the string because it's just text. To be fair, it's just text, right? We're just doing text replacements. So we're doing a replace on this. I'm looking for name, and then I'm going to my database query, and I'm getting the username, right? And then I'm going to go in here to my score. I'm copying that text filter, and I'm adding another replacement. You can do this with JavaScript, Cloudflare workers. It doesn't matter where you do it. This is just to understand the concept of it, that we're using Xano here, and we're putting the score in, right? And we're saving that. And then the only thing we need to do is put the appropriate content header in here, where we do the header. We'll do the HTTP header of content type, and it is image SVG plus XML, right? And that's the appropriate content type. So now when we publish this and we go back on this URL here that we have for this user, let's see. Oh, I think we're still returning the wrong one. Let's go back to Xano. And yeah, we need to return the SVG. We're still returning the API request, so this is why it's not working. We need to return the SVG in this API, and we'll need to publish it, right? And then if we reload this URL, you will see that we're now getting the widget, hey Mike, current score 750 with dynamic data. And then this part of the URL here would be any user that we have in our system. So we would make this dynamic. So let's just copy this, and let's let's just go now into our application. So literally into our web application, because we need to set this in our web application. Now, what I want to do is, the way it works in Despia is it works with every framework. It works with WeWeb, it works with Nordcraft, it works with Whist, it works with React, with Vue.js. But we're right now here at Nordcraft just for illustration purposes, and they do have their own abstraction in how you do this. So I don't want to use Nordcraft's action system here. I want to show you this based on JavaScript, how you would do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and write some code here myself that just will run once we, load the application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Xcode here, and it's not going to be scary. We're just going to put our URL inside of here, right? And I want to show you how we would do this. So we would start with const user ID equals, and then we would put our user ID in here, and we would, make it dynamic. So we would get the user ID, and then we would do const SVG widget URL, equals, and then we'll put this in backtick so we can make it dynamic. And then where the user ID is right inside of here, we would just do $, and we put an object in here, and then take that from the user ID so it injects it inside of here. There you go. And then once we have this widget defined, what we would do, and you could get this, like, you can get this variable from wwlib if you're using WeWeb, or from a variable in Wiz, it's pretty easy to access that. And then now we would take a look at Despia's documentation, where you see we have the SVG and the refresh rate. We would copy that. Let's go back to Xcode here. We'll just paste that, where, you know, we have this URL. It's technically not called SVG anymore. It's SVG widget URL. So I'll copy that and edit this piece inside of here, right? So we're setting in here the widget URL, and then this part has the refresh time of 10 minutes, which is, you know, we can keep. Or we can go down to 5 if we want. And then we're calling window.despia.com at window.despia equals widget : / and then we'll have the variable svg widget URL, and then we have a query parameter of refresh equals, and then with the variable of the refresh time. So now once we have this code going, we will now need to run this. So this is kind of like how we need to build the code to set the widget, and now I'm going to just run it in a code block in Nordcraft. So I'm just going to create an action, and in WeWeb you would create a JavaScript block and all kinds of things, right? So let's call this widget, and we'll create this, and then I will just put this code right inside of here. And you can make this user ID dynamic. You could get it from a WeWeb variable, you could get it from a Wist variable, you could get it from an argument in Nordcraft, right? So since we're in Nordcraft, we'll just make it dynamic. So I'm going to create an argument ID, we'll do a string, and we're going to write args.id, or we'll have a fallback of that specific user, right? So now I just go to my homepage here, and I'm just going to add a button, and the editor is reloading, and I'm going to add a button. There you go. And then on click of this button, I'm going to run this piece of code that we have inside of here, right? And now this will then set it with this specific ID. So let's call this set widget, right? So now if we go back to our application here, let's go in here, and let's just close all the applications. It's a little bit tricky. Let's just close all the applications that we have. If I click on the widget, open the application, right? And I click on set widget, and I now close it, we should see that the widget is refreshing, and it's now saying, hey Mike, current score is 750. And that data is coming from our backend, pulled into the dynamic widget using Despia's widget API. It's super simple to set up, and you can make it dynamic. It's now refreshing every 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes it's going to this URL and fetching the latest widget. So pretty cool. It's responsive to underlying data changes in your backend. So if you have any questions about this, please go to the Despia dashboard, click on customer support. We're here to help you with everything widgets and beyond that. And yeah, this was our most requested feature. We finally have it shipped. It's finally out there. You can do truly amazing stuff with those SVGs. You can do charts, you can do graphs, you can do really all kinds of different things. The sky's the limit. And yeah, look at those beautiful widgets here. Mike will be happy that his score is 750. Take a look at that. And there's way more to come with Despia version 3. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you so much for your trust and for using Despia.